Hi everybody. Good morning. My name is Polly Morris and I am here today to talk with you about stigma, addiction, and recovery. Now, I'd like to just ask a question about how many people, and if you've ever seen me speak before, I always ask this question. How many of you have been impacted by your own or someone else's use of alcohol and drugs? If you could raise your hand, keep it up. Yeah. So the majority of the room has their hands up. That's like our data. Like, we don't need to know that we have a problem. You can put your hands down. We don't need to know statistics. We can see that people who have been impacted, that's our data. So 23.5 million Americans are in active addiction today. Of those 23.5 million, for every one, there are 4 to 6 people impacted. So more than likely, we all know someone who has addiction problems, either with alcohol or with some kind of drugs. We all pretty much have been impacted by that. Fair to say? Great. Our objectives for today, we're going to define stigma, we're going to define addiction, and we're going to define recovery, and then we're going to have a general understanding of how they are with people today and how we can improve upon what we offer. So what is stigma? When you see someone who's different from you for whatever reason, different colored skin, different colored clothes, different colored speech, and you immediately have this feeling and belief that I don't like them for whatever. They're different than me. I don't understand what they're saying. I don't understand what they're doing, and I don't necessarily want to. Yeah, I'm going to stay over here with the people that I know and what's familiar to me. And that's how stigma starts. You can see on your definitions here, which I'm not going to read. You can feel free to read those, but it's like you see someone who's different from you and they're automatically considered inferior to you, like they're less than. You see somebody different from you and you want to avoid them, maybe out of fear of what we don't know. So stigma is the attitudes and beliefs that someone we don't know and we fear is not someone that's positive. It's somebody we're going to hold in disdain. So it's negative. Stigma is negative. So there's a cycle of stigma where we start to label somebody. We see somebody and we say, hey, you Joe. Joe over there, he's from Italy, ha ha. We make fun of somebody, we start with this. It's just fun. And then labels become stronger. People become discriminated against. People with addiction issues come into a hospital or a medical facility or anywhere, a community office, and they automatically have their own feelings of how they feel going in there. Scared, fear, misunderstanding. And then the feelings of shame and guilt and remorse and being embarrassed to be where you are in addiction, and then coming into a place, not only do you have your internal stigma, but now you have your external stigma. So you're carrying that all around. It's a vicious cycle. We've seen the media represent people with addiction in a horrible way. We've seen the before and after pictures of people where in the first picture they have like no teeth and they look terrible. I have had cancer, so I can speak to this. When I was getting my cancer treatment, there was no before and after pictures being shown. It was a medical condition that people treated me with respect and dignity, and I talked about my recovery with the medications, but addiction, another medical condition, we say, you got to go here every morning to get your meds, and we say, we're not going to provide you with medication. We just treat people so poorly. The drug war it's been a drug war against people, not against drugs. So the shame and blame and the terrorist way that people with addictions are portrayed as in the media is just awful. It's just not true. So what is discrimination? Stigma is the whole stereotyping vicious cycle we just talked about that imposes the shame and blame and things we have on those people, right? So discrimination now is, I don't know you, I don't like you, I fear you, I have opportunities, I am not going to offer them to you because I don't like you, I don't understand you. But I'll keep them over here. So the stigma is the thought process, the attitudes, the beliefs. The discrimination is the action. So what is addiction? Well, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug use and seeking despite harmful consequences. Let's just break that down a little bit for me anyway. So chronic, that long-term, ongoing, reoccurring, and then the relapsing, so you may have been going all right for a while, and then boom, you sort of fell off that wagon or however, bump in the road. And then the next thing is a brain disease. Wait a minute, my brain is an organ in my body just like anything else, right? Liver, kidney, spleen, bladder. However, the brain just happens to control everybody else. So when the brain is diseased, that's what happens, right? Characterized now by compulsive drug use and seeking, or drug seeking and use. Compulsive. What does compulsive mean? You cannot resist it. It's like me and chocolate. You can't resist it. Your brain is telling you, you have to have this substance, right? Chronic, relapsing, reoccurring. Your brain telling you, I've got to have this. I can't resist it. So I've got to seek the drugs and use them despite the harmful consequences that I don't have any money, and so I'm going to steal this out of my partner's purse and go get what I need. Or I got pulled over by the police last night and I had some cannabis in my car, so now they might charge me. Or I get a DWI and now I've got a charge, it's a misdemeanor. Or, despite harmful consequences, I got caught with some drugs, my charges are pending, and I couldn't get any medication to help me feel better, so I went into withdrawal, and then I got another felony. What does that mean? I can't get an apartment, I can't go in the military, I may not be able to get into some colleges, and I have to check that square box that I have a felony when I'm trying to get a job. So addiction is that whole process of your brain telling you what to do despite what's going on around you over anything else. So we're going to watch a 4-minute video by the Addiction Policy Forum, and 4 minutes, all is 4 minutes, but it has some really good infographics about how addiction is and how it hijacks the brain that I thought was worthy. So we're going to take a quick and watch that.
What is addiction? Also called a substance use disorder. Over 21 million people nationwide suffer from addiction, and 1 in 7 people will experience addiction at some point in their life. Recent increases in the use of opioids have compounded the problem. Each day, we lose 174 people to drug overdoses, and that number climbs to 415 if you factor in alcohol-related deaths. Scientists first began to understand addiction as a brain disorder in the 1950s. Doctors Olds and Milner, in laboratory studies of rats, found the parts of the brain affected by addiction. But then, in 1994, Doctors Volkoff and Schelbert, top neuroscientists, ran PET scans of the brain that showed the effects of substance use disorders. Like other diseases, these scans showed it affected tissue function. There are 2 main parts of the brain affected by drug use: the limbic system and the cortex. The limbic system, located deep within the brain, is responsible for our basic survival instincts. So when you do essential things to stay alive, like eat, drink, find shelter, have sex, or care for your young, your brain reinforces behaviors that cause the release of dopamine from this region. That reward for surviving is also transmitted to the amygdala and hippocampus, which records a memory of that feeling, so we seek it again. This is our survival hardwiring. Addiction also affects this area up here, in the prefrontal cortex, which is what separates us from other animals. This is where decision-making and impulse control live. When drugs or alcohol are used, they activate the same dopamine process in the survival center, and when use is repeated, that substance can hijack that part of the brain. This hijacker changes the brain and weakens this system to make it believe that the primary need for survival is the drug. In hijacking the brain, it can usurp those primary motivations: food, water, shelter, sex, and protecting our young. And the hijacker needs more and more of the substance to activate the same level of reward or feeling of pleasure, causing the brain tissue to become increasingly damaged with continued drug use. So why don't all people who use alcohol or drugs become addicted? There are factors that contribute to the development of a substance use disorder, including individual factors, like genes and age of exposure, and then environmental factors, like drug availability. But there is good news. Addiction is preventable. The key factors that aid in preventing addiction can be categorized into two parts: risk factors and protective factors. Protective factors range from parental involvement, programs that improve self-control, limiting availability, and increasing attachment to your community. Another key element in preventing substance use disorders is to delay when use begins. Put simply, prevention is about delaying the onset of first use. In the adolescent brain, where brain tissue is more vulnerable, the hijacker is more prone to weaken the brain and plant itself as a disease. Those with substance use disorders commonly initiate first use much earlier, between 12 and 18 years old, which increases the likelihood of the hijacker taking hold. But if the hijacker takes hold, addiction is treatable. Advancements have been made in assessments, detox, treatment programs, recovery supports, and medications to treat addiction. Brain scans show that once in recovery, the tissue in the limbic system and cortex can get better. With your help, we can expand these innovations to help millions of individuals and families and ensure that addiction is treated as the medical issue that it is. Together, we can solve this. Join us.
That video was pretty good. I do like the infographics. So as the definition and that video talk about the brain being hijacked, you know, they say that addiction is genetic, it is environmental, so nature versus nurture. For me, my parents, alcohol was part of their lives and their families. My parents were older, and they would give me sips of their drinks when I was just a baby to try to make me be quiet. And it never ever worked. Never ever worked. You know how your parents would give you like a little booze in there for Ambisol or whatever? So did all that, and then my parents, there was 8 kids in my family, right? 8 kids. And then my sister and I are the last 2. I don't know why you would want to have 2 more and have twins, forget it, but anywho. So my parents, every day my dad would come home at 5 o'clock. And he would sit down at the kitchen table and have a martini, and my mom would have one. Dad would have a olive, mom would have a lemon, and I learned how to make a martini at a very young age, Manhattans too. So that they would do that. That was a regular thing with them, and my dad would, at the end of his drink, save me that gin-soaked green olive, and I would feel so special. Here you go, Penelope. A fond moment. But the idea is that my parents, this was something they did every single day. Some people would call them maintenance drinkers. Some people would say they had their own addiction, they couldn't go without it. I know my mom, 86 years, she had a little sponge of wine before she died. Anywho, as kids, we were also encouraged to drink. We were allowed to have Boone's Farm wine. Anybody remember the Boone's Farm? Like 13% alcohol or something, strawberry flavored or whatever. We had that in fancy Aunt Marcella's glasses. And then every now and again, my dad would let us have a little creme de menthe or a little drambuie on our ice cream. Like, come on, kids, that's childhood, right? So alcohol was not something that I ever shied away from. I watched my sisters and brothers, my siblings, in their ways. And so at one point, like in 5th grade or so, my first drunk, I stole a 6-pack of PBRs, Pabst Blue Ribbons, PBRs, and I stashed them out back. Now that's a big feat in itself because I have 7 siblings who are all trying to do the same thing. So I invite my friends over. I invite Patty and Lori, BFFs forever. I invite Carol and Barb Drabant, my neighbors across the street, they're sisters. And then I invite my friend Bomar. So we've all got enough to have one of these cans of beer. And they're nice and warm by now. Woo! And so we go out back and we all have our beers. And then BFFs, they say, oh, we're only going to split one. So, okay, whatever. And then, of course, the sisters have to copy that, right? So then they split one. Bohm has 1. I have 3. yes, I have 3, and then they're all like, woo, 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 and I'm like, this is awesome, bring it on, I love this, which is crazy. But it just shows I drank differently from a young age. Was that environmental? Was that my genetics? I don't know. So then, the progression of any kind of addiction is the more you do it, the more your tolerance builds, and the more you need to feel that buzz or whatever you're trying to achieve, to feel that liquid courage. In my case, that's what it often was, because I have high anxiety, so oftentimes I just needed that little something, something. Although that's kind of a lie, because it was never little. Anyway, so addiction, in my world, really wreaked havoc when I got a little bit older. I was in high school, and I was drinking like every night of the week in high school, every weekend in junior high, and then I decided to go away to school, to music school. And my first year, I'm in Syracuse, New York. I've got some great roommates, and I'm having a great time. I'm on the dean's list. I'm just doing well. And we're drinking, we're partying, we're hanging. It's great. Second year, back in school, I had gone home for the summer and really partied it up with my friends. Haven't seen you in a while. And so the second year, I never even got a place to live. I just couch surfed, and some nights just didn't go anywhere. And I fell in love with this guy, and it wasn't reciprocated. And so I took this sort of mental health spiral where my anxiety got like wicked high. And the depression, counteracted that. So I was just in a state of confusion and depression and nauseous and nervous. So I started drinking, right? That's my solution at the time to everything I need is alcohol. And usually if I have alcohol, then I'm more likely to say yes to anything else that comes my way. So I'm drinking, and I'm drinking alone, and I'm drinking a lot alone. And so my mental health and my addiction really took a turn at that time to just, bam, go crazy. So I dropped out of school. I moved to Vermont, to Stratton Mountain, to work at this place called Liftline Lodge a million years ago, before it was fancy schmancy shopping town that it is now, if anybody's familiar with Stratton. And I met my now ex-husband, and I knew I had a drinking problem. I mean, I could tell you, and I would use bad language, poor language, and I would say, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, big deal. That means I can drink more than you, and if I do, you're buying, right? So, my now ex and I don't think the clue of the addiction was so strong, except for the fact that we followed the Grateful Dead for quite a while. No drugs there, right? So, that was just the scene. And then we came back to Vermont, and we decided that we wanted to settle down and have some kids. And I said, okay, well, I need to get ready to have kids. I need to stop drinking. I need to stop doing drugs and make it cool. And I couldn't do it. I could stop. I could stop, but I couldn't stay stopped, right? The old expression, how long can you hold your breath? So compulsive drug use and seeking, right? My brain is going like, what do you mean you're stopped? You're not drinking? You're not drinking? What? And so as I'm getting pregnant, my anxiety is getting, not as I'm getting pregnant, while I'm pregnant, my anxiety is getting a little out of control. And so I say to my doctor, this anxiety is really getting to me, what can I do? And he says, have a glass of wine. And I go, well, my doctor says I can have a glass of wine for my anxiety. Woohoo! So I do. I get anxious one afternoon, and I have a glass of wine. And then that leads to another glass of wine, and another glass of wine, and another glass of wine. And then what happens? Remember those feelings we talked about in the cycle? The guilt, the shame, the blame. I'm a terrible mother. My child is going to be born with fetal alcohol syndrome. Dave's going to find out and divorce me. His mother's going to kill me. My family's going to hate me. I am going to be a condemned woman because I drank and I ruined my child, my baby. And then, what do you do then, right? Then I feel like crap. So what do? I have a glass of wine, which leads to another glass of wine, which leads to another glass of wine. And you know what happens? The same thing, only worse. Now I feel even worse, and I can't get out of it. So the progression of the disease continues to strengthen And if you stop using for a while and then start again, as we often do when we get arrested or something happens where we're taking out of our environment of use, and the withdrawal, and then you come back and your tolerance is crazy, and you'll use and you'll die because you're not used to it. So the definition of addiction is your brain is telling you, please go get this and use it. It's the only thing you need. You don't need your kids. You don't need, like in the video, right? You don't need your kids. You don't need transportation. You don't need food. You don't need basic living. You don't need any of those things. You just need this to feel better. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you all for coming here today. This is a big deal. And you can go out of here today with your action step, changing those language, change the thoughts, change those feelings, and that will change your actions, your behaviors. Can't go wrong. Okay, thank you.